Welcome back to Spring Into Math 6. This is Mr. Stein, and today we're going to talk about decimals using multiplication and division. Okay, so during our last section we reviewed decimals using addition and subtraction. Now let's take a look at multiplication and division and using decimals in those operations. Okay, so multiplication of decimals. So I'm going to kind of go through this a little quickly because it's something that's a review for you, and really it's just multi-digit multiplication and then a couple tricks with the decimal points. So let's solve the problem 3n 532 thousandths times 658 and 2/10. So the first step within this problem is that we're going to multiply the numbers just as we would with whole numbers. So we take our two numbers and multiply them just like we normally would. So we will line up the numbers on the right, and after that we're just going to start from the right and multiply each digit in the top number by each digit in the bottom number just as we would with whole numbers. And remember, when we do that, we're going to hold the places. In this example, they use x's. A lot of people are used to using zeros. There's no right or wrong way to do it. Both of those strategies work great. So just make sure when you're doing something like this, you're taking your time, you're holding your place with a 0, and for every time you move over, you're going to hold an additional 0 or an x within that place. And then you're just going to simply add up the different products that you have and add them together to get a sum, and that'll be the final product. So now that we'll place the decimal point in the answer by starting at the right and moving the number of spaces equal to the sum of the decimal places in both numbers multiplied. So I know that's a little bit weird way to say it. So let's take a look. We have our number. I'm going to kind of zoom in a little bit for you guys. So you can see here we have our final answer of 23247624. Now if you look up here, you have all these decimal points. So let me swoop it over. So what I always think of it as a way to swoop it. So I'm going to get a little closer, and we're going to swoop it. We're going to basically count our spaces. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. So with that said, we swooped it 4 places, so we're going to do the same on the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4. And if I zoom back out, you can see that I swooped in, and so the decimal point goes right between the 4 and the 7. And you can see in my answer, the decimal point's in the same spot. So really, when you're multiplying decimals, you're just going to multiply, and then you're going to count the number of spaces from the right to the decimal point, add them together, and do the same in the product. All right, let's look at another one. So in this example, we have 6n 115 thousandths times 9 and it's written here 9 and 100 thousandth, or it would be 9 and 1/10, because remember the zeros to the right don't really add any value. So let's start looking at this problem. So starting on the right, we're going to multiply each digit in the top number by each digit in the bottom number, just as we would with a whole number, and then we're going to add up all the products. So let's take a look at what that would look like. Well, in this one, of course, we have two different zeros. So a lot of times we're trained up that we disregard those first two zeros. We multiply it by 9 and just add 2 zeros, and that strategy would work here as well. Just keep in mind that, that only works with zeros. So you can see here that we have the digits 5503,500. So now we're going to take a look at and count our decimal points over. So if you look at what we had before, we had 9 and 1/10. So we're going to count our digits. So we're going to count basically 4 digits over, because those zeros don't necessarily correlate. And so if you think about it like that, or 3 digits, excuse me, you're going to kind of zoom in and look. You got 3 digits here. You have 1, 2, 3. And then we're going to slide down. You would do the same here. And it would be 1, 2, 3. So you'd have your decimal point right there based on this example. Okay. All right, let's do a little division with decimals. So we have 2 and 9 hundredths divided by 1 and 90 hundredths. So first we have to set up and see what we're being asked. So we're doing decimal division. So we're going to remember to move the decimal point the same number of places to the right in the dividend and the divisor. All right, so let's see what that looks like. So you can see here, we're going to move the decimal point over to the right in both the dividend and divisor. So you can see that we moved it over that 2 spaces in the dividend and 2 spaces in the divisor, making it 209 divided by 190 rather than 2 and 9/10 divided by 1 and 90 hundredths. So when you do that, you think about how many times does 190 go into 209, it's going to go in one time, and you're going to get basically an extra 1 left over so that you get 190. So your answer ends up being 1 1/10. And so the key with this is, if you zoom in, you see that you move the decimal point over. So if I were to swoop it, it's 1 2 1 2. And so that's why you have a decimal point basically there. And then you can see that I added it right there, so that you're basically dealing with 2 whole numbers. And so because I have that decimal point moved over past the 9, when I divide it, 190 goes into 209 one time, and then my other part of the answer is on the right side of the decimal, making my answer 1 1/10. All right, let's take a look at one more. So we have 8 30 hundredths divided by 5 34 hundredths. All right, so first you have to see what's being asked. So again, we're looking at decimal division, and we just talked about the 2 numbers that we're dividing. So remember to move the decimal point over the same number of places to the right in the dividend and the divisor. Okay, so let's move those decimal points over. So you can see I already kind of swooped them over 2 spots, making it 830 and 534. And then you're just going to divide. Now, the answer is written kind of funny above, but you can see that 534 is only going to go into 830 one time. So if you zoom in, think about it like this. If I were to cover this area over here, think about it. If you had $830 and you're dividing it by 534 people, they're not going to get more than $1. So when you look at the answer here, you can see why it's 1 and 5,543 ten-thousandths, because of that number being moved over. All right, so when you finally would work that out, you'll get your answer just as you would. It's really just long division. And just remember to move your decimal point over in your divisor and your dividend the same amount of places. Just like when you're multiplying, you're going to swoop from the right to the decimal point and add the 2 number of spaces together and move that over in your answer, and you're going to do great. I'll see you next time.